It differs. It depends on exactly what you call funding for whole brain emulation. So, for instance, the work that was being carried out by Kernel and by Neuralink, both of which ties into whole brain emulation to some extent, um, is private funding. That's investment money. But then you have the Human Brain Project and the Brain Initiative in the United States, and a number of other initiatives like it that are also doing work that's aimed in the same direction as whole brain emulation. It produces the type of outcome, the sort of data, knowledge about neural circuits that you need if you're going to do whole brain emulation, and that is all government money. But then you've got the Allen Institute that has a fantastic team working also in the same direction. And you've got Janelia Farms Research Campus, which is also a fantastic team working on that. And especially they're working on Drosophila, on fruit fly, most of the time. And their money is private. It's an endowment. So you've got startups with investment, you've got endowments, you've got money from governments, and sometimes you've got little tiny bits and pieces here and there, like a some money that the Human Brain Project makes available for people on the outside to
Hmm.
use their systems that we are now going to use for a project on uh, developing a framework for guided neuromimetic prosthesis, sort of a making virtual brain slices that you can experiment with. That money just comes out of a trickle of a flagship project in the European Union that somehow we here in the United States are also able to make use of. So there are all kinds of little connections like that that put together the funding. But that's when you're counting all of the funds that somehow help progress whole brain emulation because you're progressing computational neuroscience and prosthetics and neural engineering in general, not because you're putting money specifically into a project that has the title whole brain
Hmm.
emulation. I would say that that sort of money is extraordinarily rare still at this point. We have occasionally seen this. You could say that when the first funding went into Kernel and Neuralink, that was close. When Dmitry Itzkov put money into organizing a congress that was essentially entirely about whole brain emulation, that was money being put specifically into a project with that title. But in general, that's still very rare. Carbon Copies is is an organization that is exceedingly cash poor
Hmm.
for that reason. And the only way that we do get projects going is by creating projects that aren't directly about we want to make whole brain emulation. We want to build this virtual brain lab or something like that, and then you get some grant money for that. But it's not uncommon. You see the same sort of thing in most academic labs where the professor of the lab has an interest, and that interest you could describe that, you could give it a name, you could say this is the topic that a professor really loves. But the research money for that lab is not allocated to the lab based on that topic or based on that
Hmm.
interest that that professor has. Instead, they have to write up a grant where they're specifically saying, okay, we think that the modeling experiments that we're about to do, which happen to be modeling experiments that fit into my topic of interest, that they're going to potentially help Alzheimer's patients because we may be able to discover how to detect it more early or something like that. And then you get grant funding for it. So that grant funding was given to a grant to a project that is ostensibly about something a little different, something that's specifically aimed at whatever the grant funding is meant for, but it contributes to the whole portfolio of work that is happening that's within that topic area that that professor cares about. So
Gotcha.
it's similar in that sense.
So I don't know if there's people dedicated in the whole brain emulation community uh, for artistic portrayal to the general public that kind of take what you guys are researching and then making an almost like a whole brain emulation for dummies, like simulation or something like that on YouTube. The only reason I ask is because I was listening to Eric Weinstein on the most recent episode of Joe Rogan podcast, and he was kind of unloading his newest theory in physics and geometry, kind of like a way to combine the two. And he was talking a lot about Einstein and the theory of relativity, and it was very complicated. And he said that a huge part of getting the average person to understand it is collaborating with the arts community, and there are people that draw these models or make these animations that kind of have a general understanding of the field and then translate that through art, that someone can watch a video on YouTube and says like, this is kind of the what whole brain emulation looks like, maybe like a 10 or 15 minute recap, and there's kind of like series of videos of people that are putting it out there. Is there anything like that right now in the field of whole brain emulation?
There are two small projects in the works where we're trying to do what you might call a primer, an intro to whole brain emulation, and another one that is more about what is the Carbon Copies Foundation about. They are in extremely early stages because we really lack artists in a sense, and you're absolutely right that if we had a beautiful animation, a nice little story that could depict what we're trying to do or trying to tell, that would be very, very valuable. And I would love it if some people with the interest to help us make that, if they would reach out to us. We have three designers and graphic designers and artist types who are currently working with us, but they have very limited time because they, of course, have their main projects that they're working on as
Mm-hmm.
well. So that's something where I don't know if anyone's listening who is an artist and who would love to work on something like that and who would like to just check us out, see if they like what we're doing, uh, and see if they enjoy collaborating with our team. It would be awesome if we could have a few more hands just helping us out
Yeah,
with
if
that.
you're listening to this and you can design, definitely hit up Randall and Carbon Copies. Put your design skills to work. And if you have an interest in the
Yeah,
human brain, that's even better.
we're really heavy on I guess computer scientists, neuroscientists, and engineers right now, and it would be great to have people from other areas of expertise join us as well.
Yeah, and going off of the private investing we were talking about before, there could be a link there where you know within the general population you have scattered people that have a lot of money that may or may not have encountered whole brain emulation, and in order to fund something significantly with millions or billions of dollars, you need information to be in a digestible form where you're able to understand it and develop a passion for it. Like in order to have a passion for something, you first have to understand it. So the more artistic renderings or simulations or designs that are just out there for mainstream consumption, the better chance you have at, luring in these big fish that say, "Hey, we want to kickstart this. We want to give something back to this community."
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, and previous experience also shows me that that's right. Yeah.